you are just moving from one risk to the next risk. You are constantly risk taking.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Aha Moments podcast with me, Kobi Omenaka. My guest this week is Craig Brown.
We're taught to fit in, and we're taught to be the same.
Craig is a stockbroker turned startup savant, and this is the first time I met him. And I should say, this is the first time I've met some of these people in this podcast, and I really enjoy having these conversations. And Craig was no different.
Are you actually spying on me? Have you got a camera in my face right now?
It was really interesting to hear him talk about how he changed his career after only 3 years working in the city. He escaped the city and took his life in a different direction after a bit of soul searching and went in the direction of startups. We bonded about what it's like to start your own company, even though you often help and are parachuted in or brought in to help other people's companies. And I really, as always, enjoyed his 3 questions at the end, his 3 aha moments questions. And I love the way different people interpret it, and Craig was no different. Craig, thank you so much for joining me on Aha Moments podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I feel like I went to bed Sunday night and I woke up and it's Thursday. So
oh wow,
yeah, the week's been quick, but good.
Does that mean you feel refreshed or energized, or are you a bit groggy?
I wouldn't say I'm groggy. I would certainly say more energized, but it just very fast. Lots of stuff happening. It's all good. All good. I'm looking forward to a holiday at some point, but yeah, all good.
I mean, when you have that holiday, will it be a relaxing? Can you actually relax? You think, or will you still be on, doom scrolling on your phone and checking LinkedIn, etc.?
No. I'm going to do the whole go remote, switch off tech, meditate, Reiki, all the good stuff.
I don't think I've done that for like 10 years. And when my wife and I went on holiday to Cuba at a time where there was super limited access to Wi-Fi and technology in between places. And at first I was like freaked out, but at the end I was like, this is the best thing in the entire world. Yeah. But I think I need to do that. I think I need to do that.
Yeah, I'm trying not to use the phrase digital detox, because there's just something about that phrase that just wants me to slightly vomit in my mouth. But I like the spirit of that is kind of what we all need.
What's going on?
Yeah.
So can you give me a bit of a background about yourself, Craig? We connected via the Growth Mentor platform, which I'll touch shortly. But where does your career start? Where does your work life start? Yeah.
So first big adult job was in banking. I was a stockbroker. So I worked for kind of one of the big name banks, and helping big institutional investors understand what type of investments they should make, working with our own research analysts to understand what calls in the market they're making, and how we can kind of tell a story on some big name companies in a direction that they're going in. And it was quite an exciting job, and it was very fast moving. And so I probably already ticked a few boxes in the first job in terms of fast paced storytelling. But after 3 years, I was like, maybe not quite the right fit.
Sure. When you said the but there, what happened after the 3 years, or was it like an ebbing, like day by day? It was like the weights just got heavier in a way.
Yeah, I think it was that thing of every day's different, and yet every day is the same at the same time. So there would be news in the markets, results season, new kind of stories on companies coming out. Our analysts will come up with new takes on the direction certain sectors and companies are going in. And, in some ways it was interesting. And then in some ways it just started to become quite monotonous and quite samey. And then I think I felt like quite quickly I was plateauing. And I guess I have this low boredom threshold or high boredom threshold, however you put it. I just feel like I need to be constantly moving. And I think I just got to the point by year 3 that I was like, I don't think this is going to change, no matter how senior I become. And I need to do something else.
3 years. I mean, 3 years is quite a quick turnaround to kind of come to those conclusions, though, isn't it? So I guess you didn't waste that much time down that pathway.
Yeah, I think that's quite an interesting take, because the first year was working in different parts of the bank, so there was that variety, and there was that element of figuring stuff out. And so by second year, it was kind of first time really getting into a job as an adult. And just kind of enjoying the life of, I'm taking home a salary and I live in London and this is cool. I think by year 3, it was like, okay, there was probably an element of that self-discovery that was starting to come through, and that introspection and some of the questions of, do I enjoy this? Does this make me happy? Am I satisfied? And I think I
Mm.
started having more difficult conversations with myself when I was waking up and thinking, oh, okay, I'm not, I don't hate going in, but I'm not excited by the prospect.
Yeah.
And I think for a time that was fine. Maybe I accepted that as normal, but then I didn't want to accept it as normal.
I mean, that's fair enough. But like I said, I think they're still very, very quick to kind of come to that conclusion, unless your job and your future career. Sometimes you can kind of sense from day one that, oh, I've made a huge mistake. People can quite often shuffle along for 10 years because it's an easy thing to do. You can kind of go to the next phase. You're used to your income, you're used to the kind of the lifestyle, not saying it's lavish or not, but you're just used to the fact that you've got an income, you're going to do on a Friday night or a, Tuesday night. And that is the lot in life that people have for themselves. And, but again, I just think 3 years is a great point to, is immature. I'm not sure mature, but I'm impressed in a way that after 3 years, you're like, let's take the next step.
I think,
or let's pivot.
I think there was also a kind of a lot of personal stuff I was going through
Sure.
as well. And so when I think back to the journey I went on from school through university and through to work, I think there was this bigger unraveling of a lot of walls and layers that I had to build up in order to conform. So I went to an all boys Catholic school. I'm gay, and it's super fun. And there was a lot of, I guess, strategic maneuvering. How do I keep people happy? How do I stop people bullying me? There was just a lot of worrying about other people and
Yeah.
fitting in and trying to suss out the standard. And so
Sure.
I subscribed to a lot of those things. And so I think from a career perspective, I was starting to get to the point where I was like, I don't have to pretend anymore. I don't have to pretend to be this person or fit in.
Yeah.
And so when I started realizing that in a very personal dimension, it eventually got to the kind of professional level where I thought, I don't have to do this job anymore. I don't have to do this to impress other people. I'm not impressing myself. And that's when you unlock something or you open up something and confront yourself. And so that was all happening very much at the same time. And it may, I mean, I haven't really thought about this before, Kobe, but it probably did speed up my journey to getting to that point of, well, okay, if I don't have to pretend to do this and that, then I also don't have to pretend to love my job. So like, let's just get on with it.
And that helps to unlock in my head where your head was at, because I think what happens a lot I see is that people, they're in school, then they go to university, and that helps them to blossom a bit.
Yeah.
But then there's still kind of a walls around you. You're kind of supported by your parents. You kind of supported. You have to go through the system, and then when you leave, you start a new job. Were you from London, I guess, or were you from a different place before?
No, so I grew up in the Channel Islands. I grew up in Jersey.
Oh wow, yeah.
So
sure.
Islander.
Yeah.
Went to university in Edinburgh, and then moved down to London after that.
Yeah. Just as an aside, Edinburgh, I always say it's one of my top 3 favorite cities in the entire world.
Amazing, beautiful.
Yeah. I would have loved to have gone to university there.
Yeah. You're in Manchester though. Manchester's an awesome city.
I mean, Manchester. I mean, I love Manchester, and I'm back. I'm happy in here. And I often say, I'm a Manc before I say I'm British.
Yeah.
In a way. But I, up until the pandemic, for like a decade, I was at Edinburgh every single year in the dreaded August time when the festival was on.
Oh yeah.
But I was as happy as a pig in shit during that month and loved everything about it.
Yeah.
But so you've gone from Edinburgh to London, and then it gives an opportunity to then spread the wings even wider, and then it's why wait, I guess. So this all kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So how did you even think about what the next stage was? From investment, stockbroker, banker, working in institutional investment, because that's an experience I had prior to pandemic and pre-pandemic, working with a company which is now called Proximity, which was spun out of Citibank, all about institutional investment and shaking up the industry there, because there's a lot of silly nonsense that happens there, which I was really surprised at how much stuff goes on, which doesn't being share voting being shared by fax and by post. I'm just like, why is this still a thing? Why is this even a thing when you can get an Uber? It's just makes no sense.
Exactly.
So these things are happening, and what do you even consider to be the next logical step there? Do you take a pause, or do you meet someone who's like, actually, this could be the way for me?
Yeah, I wish at this point I had the story of I got discovered and I got signed to this film, and that was it. The rest is history. Uh, I think I knew that I didn't want to be where I was, and I felt
Yeah,
this very profound friction between what I'm doing today, what my job entails, and me not enjoying it and me not wanting to be there. So it was like this kind of big call to freedom inside that was like, you've got to get out. And I
yeah.
don't think I could have figured out where I go next or what I wanted to do next without having made that step. So I basically made this blind leap out, and I didn't have anything planned. I was like, I've got to go. I've got to go.
Yeah,
And so I basically put my hand up and I said, I'm like, I don't, yeah, I don't want to be here anymore. And,
nice.
I can't do this. And like, they were very helpful with that. So I took about a year out, and it was probably one of the most difficult years of my life, because I thought these ideas or this inspiration would come to me of what that next step would look like, and it didn't, and I had no idea and I had no clue. And I think that is when it really hit me just how much I had changed myself in order to adapt into society and be
Mm,
the thing that I thought society wanted from me and expected from me. And that's just the that was just the trauma response of the shit that I went through in school. And so it was the
mm.
beginning of that process of peeling back the layers of that onion, or
Yeah, yeah.
rather that, these things that I had to pretend to be. And so I think what's difficult is when you go through a process like that, you don't know what parts of you are necessarily real or what parts are manufactured, and what you had to do in order to survive. And so that's really kind of what happened that year was, all right, I have to kind of start leaning into doing stuff I actually want to do, which weirdly is very difficult and
Oh,
scary
yeah.
when you're not used to doing that. And so I really started to explore different ideas. And so it really took me about a year to think, I want to work for a smaller company. I want to work for a cool company where I can wear my own clothes. I want to work for a company that has a mission and a purpose. And that's where I discovered tech and startups and cool people and the ability to not wear a suit every day. And it was great.
I mean, one ish change I made was I used to work in oil and gas, and then I
Oh,
worked in, and that's not in the finance world. It was
yeah.
as a chemical engineer,
Oh, wow.
designing the plants and things like that.
Oh, super
And
cool.
then I moved to a company in Norway from Manchester, and from there it was like in the Manchester it was like shirt, tie, suit if you were meeting a client, and I went to like Norway where it was like I wore a Superman hoodie every day, and if you really wanted to, you could wear a shirt and tie, if you're going to meet a client, but no one really gave a shit.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, right, this is better for me at least. And it's interesting how those things can just unlock yourself.
Totally.
And I would imagine that at your school, like mine is like the uniform was quite regimented,
Oh,
which has positives and negatives
yeah.
to it,
Yeah.
certainly, but it's still like you're fitting within a box, or you're fitting within like what you're perceived to be, or
Yeah.
whatever you're supposed to be, and then you go into work where I'm sure you're like, dude, where's your tie? Where's your jacket? Kind of thing.
I mean, this is the word uniform, right?
Yeah,
Uniformity, being
yeah,
being the same, and so in so many different ways, when we're growing up, we're taught to fit in, and we're taught
yeah,
to be the same, and that's a good thing. And so it's difficult when you fundamentally don't fit that mold to then think, okay, but how do I survive and how do I avoid the discomfort and the pain that comes from wanting and needing to be yourself?
mm,
And a lot of that gets delayed, and so you have to confront that later on in life. I remember these like I'm just like kind of thinking about it now. You were talking to me about moving to Norway and kind of not having to wear a suit anymore. I remember this
yeah,
one moment. I was on the trading floor, came into work one day, and I decided, for whatever reason, I decided I'm not going to shave. It was like even less than what you can see on my face right now. And
yeah.
my manager just spotted it straight away and said, "Did you shave last night?" And I was like, "No, I don't really want to keep shaving 4 layers of my skin every night. It's like it's fine. My clients are my age and they don't wear ties. I feel I was trying to make a business case at this point. I think it's good to reflect who our customers are and just be a little bit more chill. He was so old school. It's like, no, you can't look like that. Go home right now and shave. He literally told me
Yeah.
there in front of everybody, and it was deliberately humiliating. He was trying to make a point. And I think that was probably one of the first moments where I just thought, oh, fuck this is bullshit. And it's just like it basically he just kind of represented what I thought was a lot of those values that actually I was at some point going to start breaking away from, which is uniformity, conforming, and almost to a point that it doesn't make sense anymore. So yeah, I think that was probably like one of the first nails in the coffin of my career in banking.
So when you step into the startup world, I mean, when I started working with startups, even SMEs, was like the whole kind of, we're going to change the world and also hopefully make some money from it, but also we're going to change the world kind of vibe. And I mean, how did that manifest for you, if at all?
I loved it, and I still love it, and it's difficult to try and reconcile being this. I guess I like to think of myself as someone that's kind of as real, and I'm not a bullshitty kind of person, and I like authenticity. And I think I'm half Irish and half British, so I actually feel kind of both cultures are kind of quite like this. We don't kind of celebrate or admonish this kind of big vision and almost this delusion of wanting to do something big and great. It's a little bit like, all right, chill out, stay in your lane. Don't try and be, kind of, you've got a big head. We want to kind of put you in your place. Like, I think there are kind of elements of our culture that does that. And so I quite like that about the tech world. And there is that kind of a bit of that cultural import from the US that I think is a good thing, that people are in subtle ways taught, if you're going to make it, you have to have this delusional self-belief. That doesn't mean your first startup or your current startup is going to work, but it is, for me, a really important ingredient. And that is something that I've found quite infectious. So if I go to events where I meet other founders or other people in the startup world, there is that energy that I think is actually quite fun and cool.
So how do you describe your role now, or your job now, or your career now?
So I run a product marketing consultancy for B2B SaaS. I'm very lucky. I get to work with different startups, founders all over the world, helping them figure out their growth challenges, specifically around how they position their products in the market, who they're targeting, and how they engage and communicate with that target buyer. These are all really fundamental challenges that early stage and growth stage startups face. And in my career in working in startups, I feel like I've had this kind of education, and it's also really tapped into this love of building things. And I think when I look back through my career, I've always been building. And I reached a point, I remember the last startup that I worked at, I wasn't there for very long. And I really liked the team, I really liked the product, but I just realized I needed to start building my own thing. And so this, for me, I call this business number one because I think deep down there is this desire to be involved in multiple companies and multiple startups. But for me, this is company number one. And I think for me, it's also a great education in building a business, but working with other companies that are also building businesses. And so right now, I'm a one person, business, but this year is very much a big focus on my own go-to-market and hiring and building the team. And I've been doing a lot of figuring out with the business, but yeah, very much in business building mode. And I feel I've made that transition from being Craig the freelancer to Craig the consultancy agency owner and builder.
I mean, that's similar to position to where I'm at now, because it's kind of strange where I'm often work with companies and I'm helping them to scale up and build. And now I'm like, so I've always been a freelancer, and now I was like, okay, so what's it actually like to have a bit more of a base and build up something that's more than just me, so I can work in a different way within the business, not servicing clients directly, but actually build out and maybe do a few things I'm a bit more interested in.
Yeah,
and
totally.
It's actually it's kind of like, why is my head not getting around this? Why can I not wrap my head around what I need to do? Because I can see other people's businesses and go, this is what you need to do, I'll help you do that. But looking at myself, I'm like, Kobe, you know what you need to do, but why aren't you doing it?
I'm honestly having exactly the same conversations with myself this week. I've had this conversation with different people, either in a similar situation or just doing the coffee catch up. And they're like, what do you need to do? And I'm like, I think actually in the last couple of months, I've figured out those next steps. But, for me, two things. One, I probably just need to take a bit of a break over summer. I think I'm going to take,
Mm,
like 3 to 4 weeks out. I've been working really hard for the last couple of years. I haven't really properly switched off. Even when you do the Christmas holidays and you go back with family, you're still checking
yeah,
emails. You're still doing a bit of work here and there, right? So like proper kind of zone out, no urgency around any of the work that you're doing. You can just finally give your brain a bit of time to rest. But I think, which I find really fascinating, is that, you, Kobe, you've made the decision to start your own business and businesses, right?
mm,
I've made the decision to launch my own business, and it's a risk, and we taken the risk, and I think that's really cool. And then we kind of went. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not going to speak for you, but I'll speak for myself here when I say I feel I got to a point where I then said, okay, no more risk taking. And it's like, well, hang on, you're building a business. You are just moving from one risk to the next risk. You are constantly risk taking, and I think you have to be in
yeah,
that mindset. And I had to check myself recently because I was like, oh, hang on, I'm falling into that trap. I'm playing it too safe. It forced me to step back and go, what do I need to do now? I'm ready for the next step. I've been ready for the next step probably for a while and just didn't realize it. And I'm probably being a bit unfair on myself, but there it's just the next risk that you now have to take, which is bringing on someone in a fractional capacity or just investing a lot more financially in growth initiatives. It could
yeah.
be a number of those things, but I think it's that, it's just a new plateau that we've reached, and we've just got to now take that step outside of
For
the
the next
new
step.
comfort zone, which is bigger than it was before, but we've now got to the boundary of that comfort zone, and it's time to move on.
So before we get to the questions that I ask everyone,
Yeah.
how do you mentor, help, work with the startups, companies who are trying to get that product market fit or trying to connect with their clients? Is there, I know it's how long is a piece of string, but is there a key process or a key thing that you look to help unlock with these companies, with these founders?
Yeah. So yes and no. No, because there are always differences in the
Mm,
approach that I have to take with each company that I work with. So, for example, right now I'm working with a health tech company. The platform is huge, and normally I would say you've built too much, but actually for the platform for this product, it has to be that way. Like that is the only way. So
there's
that
no half measures.
there's no, yeah,
Yeah,
so it's not, I can't turn around and say you've got to get super specific around the problems and challenges your product solves. Like this product has to be broad to do what it does. So,
yeah,
I love that because it's a new challenge. If you are an early stage business, you might be figuring out the first tenets of your product positioning, which is who are the buyers that you are targeting? What problems that are unresolved are you looking to solve? How are you looking to do it differently versus competitors and alternatives in the market? And on an emotional level as well, what movement are you building that really speaks to your customer, your target customer? Because I personally think it needs to be more than you're solving a problem. I think there needs to be a kind of an emotional dynamic that you are making this change in the world, which sort of goes back to the conversation we were having, which is this very kind of you know Bay Area, San Francisco-esque kind of change the world mindset. I think there needs to be that ambition that actually is part of that value proposition, or rather part of that narrative. So these are the things that I'm always trying to figure out. And so when I say no, there of course have to be nuances in the approaches that we take, and
of
also
course.
the challenges that I'm trying to solve. One company will say, "Look, we're really super clear on the customer. We're just not sure which of their problems we're solving." Or someone else will say, "We've got this problem that we're solving, but there are a million different people we could solve this problem for." So essentially, it will come down to three things when I'm working with a startup, which is to say, okay, who are you targeting? What problem are you
Hmm.
solving? And then how is your product going to uniquely solve that? And those three things can be constantly moving as you go on that growth
As you
journey. In
yeah,
the early days, if you make pivots, those are the three things that might change. But that ultimately is the focus around when I go through positioning and messaging. And sure, I've got frameworks and processes that we go through and the workshops we deliver, but ultimately those are the three questions that I'm looking to answer.
Perfect. And it's hard. It's hard. And
Really hard.
Working with founders, working with people at the stage, working with myself, it's tough to answer those questions. You think you have a vision of it being one way, and it's hard to accept that maybe it's not that way.
Ooh.
But then options B and C might also be equally great that you hadn't really considered. So yeah.
It's quite an emotional journey as well, working with founders, and especially in the kind of the mentoring side of things. So there's one thing where I'm doing the project work and we're doing kind of really strategic stuff, but on the kind of mentorship or coaching side, it's quite emotional stuff where you're saying to a founder, look, it's time to get narrow on who you're targeting. And there's this kind of fear of, we're going to leave money on the table. I need to grow. And overcoming these very understandable concerns. And, sometimes the conversations can get to kind of deeper places. And I think there's something quite satisfying about, understanding where people are coming from. And again, it kind of it goes back to the conversation we were having, before, when I was talking about taking the risk of starting a business, and then you start taking a risk. I sometimes see that with startups, and they go, okay, building this startup, we've sort of narrowed down a bit in terms of who we're serving, the problems we're solving, but then they kind of stop because they're worried, about going too far or getting too narrow, because maybe they will, leave money on the table. And the message is you've actually got to keep going.
I think that the leaving the money on the table, and also for me, is, are they going to buy it in the first place? If I focus too quickly on one specific group of people, however you choose to define them, firmographic, demographic, whatever, could I be spending so much time and suddenly find out they're the wrong people for what I'm trying to offer? And there was those people over there. Mm-hmm. So that's for me, that's me personally, and also working with other clients, that's often a tough challenge to try and get to the core of that, to try and test that, to try and validate that yes or no. So yeah.
So you've got this great idea, and you just want to go to market, and you want it to be successful. And so when I come along and say, right, let's validate it, let's do research, but we've got to do it this way, and we have to be really thorough about it. It's just, it can, I get it. It can just be a bit like, oh no, I just really want to get going. It's like kind of that hunger and that irritation to move and be progressing. And so the thought of, well, actually we might invalidate the idea because the market will just say that they don't need this. They don't need this product, or they're not really willing to pay for it. That's a bummer, we don't want that. I get it.
The way you said invalidate there was like, oh,
it's so horrible. It's such a cussing word.
Your company is invalid. Is the
no. I know. I didn't think that you're so attached to what you're building. It can feel like a personal attack, and so it's hard. But in my experience, in the majority of cases, you end up just figuring out that there is a new pain or a new problem with a similar group of customers that your product can solve. And actually, there is a bit of a change. There's a bit of a pivot, and maybe your product roadmap will look a bit different, especially in the short term. But that's usually the experience that I find startups and founders that I'm coaching and mentoring. They will go through that process. I had that very recently with a startup in Paris, and they realized that actually they don't need to incorporate AI into their product, and there is a more specific, a better defined problem for a smaller group of customers that they can serve, and they're starting to feel traction with it. But there was that process that they were going through for a couple of months before that, where they felt uncertain, and it was, it's heavy. And I think, part of what I want to do is actually try and get them through that as well, and just say, look, this is going to be worth it.
I think and it'll keep on happening time and time again as new technologies arrive or new opportunities arrive. There's one company I was working with, and in the past few years, where blockchain was nascent and definitely much on the ascendancy, and they were like, we want to do this using blockchain. And I was like, yeah, but why? Because when you use blockchain, I was like, yeah, but also why? Exactly, because it just adds layers of extra. You can get to the next stage without the blockchain, and if the validation is there, then sure, add those layers into it. But do you actually need that? Because it's just going to make everything else way more complicated at this stage and take longer to unpick if you don't need it. And then it's a similar kind of thing with AI. It's like, lots of companies are getting funded if they have an AI aspect into it. But often I'm thinking, yeah, but why is there AI in that product? I don't understand why.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it's a nice to have, but I'm like, but why is it in there?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's just an interface or a wrapper over an LLM. And by the way, I'm not anti-wrapper. I think there are ways that wrappers can add value. But what tends to happen is they're trying to solve too many use cases, and then there is so much work involved with that wrapper that you're then not really doing much in addition to what exists. But I sometimes look at products and I'm like, I don't really understand why you've got this AI prompt in here. It's not really saving me any time at all.
No. So they can get funded. Okay, so this podcast is called Aha Moments. I've got 3 questions to ask you, the same questions I ask everyone. First question is, can you think of an aha moment for your clients or your clients' clients, I guess? And how did you find that aha moment for them or yourself? And how did you get them to that moment? So how do you get to that moment where they realize the aha moment as soon as possible?
Yeah, I'm going to be really boring and anonymized about how I talk about a couple of the client that I was speaking to recently. They were struggling with market traction. The thing that really struck me first when I visited the website was just how big and ambitious the positioning of the company was, or rather the problem that they were trying to solve. It was very much kind of transformation based. It was, transform your culture. And it's just like, that's such a big thing that this small early stage tech company is proclaiming to solve, is workplace culture. I don't even know what that means. And I kind of spent a lot of time saying, look, I'm really sorry. I'm just going to ask you really dumb questions, but I really need to understand what any of this means. And we basically got down to transforming. I shouldn't use the word transformation because it's literally what they were promising to their clients, and that was the problem. We're moving away from this transformation message, which is, transform this big thing, down to what is this existing process that you're just helping to make better in some way. It feels less ambitious, but actually it's much more commercial, and it's easier for someone to kind of go, oh, okay, you can make my survey generation as part of my research process a lot easier and quicker and more accurate, rather than transform your research. It's picking one constituent part of the process that hasn't been touched and you're making a lot better. So this was the process that I was going on. And I just remember that they kind of got to the, oh, you're right, this now finally makes sense. There are kind of 2 things in particular that we do that a lot of people get excited about, but our messaging is completely kind of diverged from that. And they felt they had to speak to this kind of higher value of workplace culture that they're transforming. So I think for them, that was probably the aha moment. Once we started getting into what a customer's saying, let's look at transcripts of conversations. When you have your future conversations coming up, here are the questions to ask them. So I think that was kind of the first moment. And then for another,
I think pretty much every single person I've spoken to has said, what are your customers saying? Have their conversations. This is, a perfect use case for AI is those transcripts and bunch them all together. What's the commonalities? What's common themes? Using the exact words that they say, and being open to what you find out as well.
100%. I think right now, when we do customer research, I think we look for the obvious things. I want to save time. I want to make more money. I want to bring in more customers. And so that can be the thing you focus on, as opposed to the more emotional layers or some of the social dynamics of why you want to look better versus competitors in a particular way, or when you're thinking about how you can make the life of that target customer better. I think when it comes to aggregating customer research, the only concern I have still with AI is its inability to really pick up on nuance. And you can look at a transcript and someone will articulate a point and say, I really want to solve this problem, or, this is really annoying, or this is really frustrating. But it doesn't necessarily capture the nuance or the weight of the emotion that they use to actually articulate the point. And that's something I really look out for. So if someone speaks about something in a really passionate way, that's something
transcript doesn't do that.
It just doesn't, and maybe, AI will get to that point in the not too distant future. But I would say it does solve some of the challenges that I have when it comes to, look, I need to aggregate data across all of these transcripts, and it can pick up some things like, what are the common jobs that they're trying to accomplish on a day-to-day basis? What are those classic obstacles that prevent them from doing that job to a better quality standard or faster? But it doesn't necessarily pick up on whether something has been articulated with a particular weight of emotion that makes me go, okay, this is something that's interesting here, and actually maybe something we want to incorporate in messaging, or something we want to drill down to and even more to understand better. So that's where I would say right now I think there are limitations to what AI can do, but it's definitely come on leaps and bounds from where we were even 2 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll go into the second aha moment. I know you had another one prepped, but I think one is a great thing to take away, if that's all right with you.
Yeah,
unless you want to. Yeah. So the second aha moment question: product or service that you buy or bought into. What was your aha moment for you personally when you found that?
A multi-marketing agency founders, they've gone on the journey before, and I came across them either through other people that have worked with them, or they reached out to me through email or LinkedIn or whatever. And basically their offer is to understand how I get from what feels like freelancer stage to marketing agency stage. And they were just articulating very specific pain points and feelings and emotions in a way that just makes me go, exactly the experience that I'm going through. And I think there was just such a level of precision and empathy in their messaging that made me think, I need you. I don't care if you're more expensive than some of the other options that I was considering. You get me on such a level. And I think there's that emotional connection that, again, I think is so powerful when you bring to product messaging, company messaging. That is why I think, in the age of AI and the ability to build and replicate products, there needs to be something a bit more emotional and really build that understanding of the consumer that you're targeting, which is why, again, I think it's really fundamental for early stage startups to be clear on who they're targeting and the problems that they're solving. There are these two consultants that I'm speaking to right now, and they're very clear. They're helping the early stage solopreneur marketing agencies get from person one to person two, but knowing what is needed in that process. And it's the thing that kind of got me really excited, whilst also looking at my bank account and going, okay.
So it's going back to going from one person to the next person, because that's a key hire, right? That's a key stage that maybe is that stage you hadn't really considered. You were just kind of like, okay, so I'm going to have me, and then I'll be maybe in a weird work with 10 people, but you hadn't really thought about what that next step is, and that's like a core message there.
Yeah, it was the way that they articulated was to say, you've probably got solid ideas about what you need to do. You have no idea what order you need to do it in. You don't know what seniority of that hire looks like. You don't understand, X, Y, Z. I mean, there are just so many specifics that they went into that I just thought, are you actually spying on me? Have you got a camera in my office right now? Because I'm scared at just how accurate this is. And so it's that it was that kind of precision that made me think, I already have an element of trust in you. And then when I look at your profile, I can see that you've got this background in building marketing agencies, one of which is serving a similar customer base to me. So even more of a feeling of, okay, you understand the challenges that I'm going through. And so a lot of that sale, I guess, from that perspective is already done. I mean, I'm trying to think of I don't know, tech or physical products where I've gone through that experience as well of aha, but I think that's by far the closest the only time that I've really kind of gone, my goodness, you really get me.
But this is what you were saying on the other side for your clients, and this is what I've seen in this podcast discussions time and time again. It's that language market fit when someone says the words that you feel like, hold on, like you say, have you been spying on me? Have you got a way to, have you incepted my brain? What is going on here? But also it's undeniable to kind of say, yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. So here's the money I didn't think I had.
I don't have
to give you, because
I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna have to. You get me too much. It's done.
Yeah. You had me at those words.
Yeah, literally.
Final aha moment question is, I'm sorry, we should say your company's called Troubadour, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Troubadour. I wanted to. I think I did the wrong thing when it comes to naming companies, which is to not get too thoughtful about it. I think you're meant to pick something that's kind of quite SEO friendly. So I basically frickin' failed at that. But I wanted just wanted the fun interpretation of this idea of storytelling. I work with SaaS companies. I help them tell their story, and so for me, troubadours are this kind of very romantic interpretation of that. These musicians and spoken word artists and poets, and they would travel Europe, right? They're global, and they communicate and they tell stories. And I just thought that's just kind of just a fun, playful notion.
Well, I mean, having a story behind it and having that kind of why behind it is often a lot of the journey. And it's important as I'm making the next steps myself. Like, some of the things are hard, and I'm just have to go back to the why. It's the why I'm doing this every single step. I've got a kid who's just turned 5. If we didn't have him, then the decisions I've been making would be very, very different, kind of thing as well. So it's going back to that why, and having that kind of baked into your name, I think is even though it's not super SEO friendly, maybe it's got that U in there at the end, which probably tricks people.
It does. Yeah.
Then it's but it's a core of what you are, and ultimately, if they find you on LinkedIn, they're kind of sidestep that in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
So this final question is an aha moment or life hack. Sorry, my voice is breaking at 45 years old. An aha moment or life hack that a personal aha moment that you'd like to share with people.
Yeah, I'm surprised that my voice hasn't broken during this podcast. Something I learned during so I do a bit of stand-up comedy on the side. I haven't done it for I'd say the last year or so. I've dipped in here and there, but I haven't performed any shows for over a year. But on my journey to kind of learning comedy, I've done a couple of courses. I think there is one lesson that really stuck with me, which is to lean into your imperfections. And when I go up on stage, I say to myself, I have permission to be imperfect. I have permission to fuck up, to not get this right, because I think when you try and remember word for word how you're going to deliver it, you just put a cage around yourself, and there's no freedom in it. There's no fun. And I think you need to allow yourself to have that fun, and which means that there isn't this standard of 100% perfection. It doesn't exist, but of course we create in our minds what that looks like. I tend to find the more freedom you give yourself and the more fun you can have in that moment, the more likely you are actually, ironically, to reach that standard that you actually want. So I think in everything that I do, even jumping on this podcast with you, I'm like, I don't want to over prepare. I don't want to overthink this, because I will come across as just the worst person and someone who I'm not. And I've got to allow myself to just not do it 100% perfect. It's just not fun.
I love that. I've had that like many times in I guess in sports in some way. I've had those moments where I'm not a good footballer, but someone's just passed me the ball and I'm like, fuck it, I'll just go. And then run through people and scored a goal in it. And I'm like, I don't know how I did that. And there's no way I can recreate that.
Yeah.
There's no way I could train to do that.
That's it.
Even if I tried.
Never again will that ever happen. But that was beautiful.
Yeah.
And no one was there to record it. Why?
Yeah. Yeah. This is pre-phones, iPhones and stuff like that. And
yeah.
I was like, so I still live in that moment sometimes. And
but you will create another moment that is completely different, but completely awesome.
Absolutely.
In its own way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm learning the guitar now. I've played guitar since I was a kid. But I've always just played songs and like forgotten them as soon as I've gotten, and then I'm learning properly now and learning the scales, learning the notes.
Yeah.
And that gives you that bit of freedom to go, if you make a mistake, actually that's fine. Just bend it into something else, and that could be a different direction that you hadn't expected before. And then you're like, oh well, now this is a thing you do.
It is. It's like it's this completely unintentional creativity that you're like, oh shit, I've stumbled upon something quite good here.
Now, the analogy I give to people is you're fluent in English, but that doesn't mean you know every single word in the dictionary. And you just don't need to know. You just need to know that you can get to the understanding in however many different kind of routes.
Exactly.
And when you learn a new language, often you're frustrated because you don't know the words, but you don't need to know the words. You just need to know how you want to say the thing, and you can get there.
Yeah.
It might be choppy to start off with, but you'll get there, and better at doing the same thing.
And there's something beautiful about the journey and getting there as well. It's more satisfying, but I think there's a lot of character building on that as well that you don't get from just knowing it straight away.
Absolutely, 100%. Craig, thank you so much for joining me. Are you happy for people to contact you on LinkedIn or via your website, which I will include in the show notes and comments if you want people to?
Yes, yeah.
So. Otherwise,
absolutely, yeah. Contact me. Just add me as a connection on LinkedIn or drop me a message, whatever. LinkedIn is usually the easiest place to get me.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I've really had a blast chatting to you. And thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast, this episode of Aha Moments podcast with me, Kobi Omenaka, and my special guest, Craig Brown. Craig, thank you so much for joining me. It was a pleasure meeting you, and I know we will connect after this. If you want to connect with Craig, head down into the show notes, head down into the comments if you're watching on YouTube, and all his details there. Click the link to his website, troubadour.co, and click the link to his LinkedIn. He said he's happy for you guys to reach out to him and say hello. So please do that. Whilst we're here, whilst I have you, whilst you're still listening, please do like, subscribe, leave a review if you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or Pocket Casts. Leave a comment below if you're listening or watching, I should say, on YouTube. It really does help more people listen to this podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll see you in the next episode.